So, for our final discussion, we're going to zoom out from this little corner on the edge of Eurasia called the EU to the globe as a whole, and to talk about the role that AI can have in achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And it's very timely given that next week is the UN General Assembly and a meeting focused on one Sustainable Development Goal, in particular, the climate. This discussion is facilitated by the Future Society, an independent nonprofit, and I think that Yolanda Langquist and Cyrus Hodes, who are respectively head of research and advisory at the Future Society, and then co-founder and executive director of the AI initiative, will tell you also a little bit about what the Future Society itself does and introduce an excellent panel for the next and final discussion. Yolanda, Cyrus, the floor is yours, please.
Hi, everyone. So as you know, or may know, AI can be understood as a general-purpose technology, and as such, can be really instrumental to make progress towards some of the world's greatest challenges, including the United Nations' 17 Sustainable Development Goals. These SDGs cover a wide range of global challenges, from poverty, hunger, climate change, inequality, human rights abuses, gaps in access to education and healthcare, and more. And with AI, we can predict, monitor, analyze, and make progress towards achieving these SDGs. However, there are numerous practical considerations and challenges in applying AI for SDGs, including gaps and differences in capabilities and technical expertise, and especially quality data sets for AI, especially in developing country contexts. We also need to be sure to mitigate unintended consequences, side effects, and risks in applying AI and digital technologies for social good. I myself was the ethics rapporteur at the AI for Good Global Summit in Geneva this year, so I wanted to share with you the 5 main ethical implications and considerations that we discussed there concerning applying AI for SDGs. First, in fulfilling the urgent need to apply technology and AI for SDGs, we need to, of course, be sure to manage numerous risks, including, as you may know, bias in data, data privacy and security, gaps in access and inclusion, and who gets to leverage and use AI technologies, potential for unemployment and widening inequalities, challenges to fairness and transparency, and many more. Second, we definitely need a multi-stakeholder, multicultural, and multidisciplinary approach to bring diverse perspectives. And this includes, of course, more diversity in the AI field to make sure that AI development and design reflects all of the people and populations that AI will affect globally. And lastly, to acknowledge the tensions and sometimes trade-offs among the 17 SDGs, which we can remember are numbered from 1 to 17, therefore possibly affecting their prioritization. So we'll start with a fireside chat led by my colleague Cyrus Hodes, also my classmate from the Kennedy School at Harvard, and executive director of the AI initiative at the Future Society, before the panel. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Yolanda. And so we have a very exciting panel today because we have somebody who has hands-on experience on the field and somebody who has hands-on experience in global policy. So we're going to try to combine both and make sense of it. This subject is coming more and more to the almost mainstream. We're talking about AI for SDG as being something concrete and real now, which is very exciting. So I'm introducing here Nikolai Astrup. So Nikolai Astrup is the minister, the Norwegian Minister of Digitalization. He is also responsible for ICT policy within his ministry. What's very interesting about the minister is also was previously the Minister of International Development. So linking both will be very interesting here. And what makes him even more interesting is that he was part of the high-level panel on digital cooperation set up by Antonio Guterres and led by Melinda Gates and Jack Ma. So we're going to discuss that and then this overview that you have on how to implement it at the global level. And Sofia Kyriazi is working with the UNHCR. She's an AI engineer there. She has a first-hand experience on the field. So she's currently supporting UNHCR's AI project focusing on challenges related to predictive analytics and natural language processing, and to better understand and tackle displacements within refugees. So I'm going to open the floor with you, Minister, so you can give a brief overview for 5–10 minutes of your work there, and then pass it on to UNHCR. We're going to have a discussion there.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for having me in this panel. This is, I think, a very timely topic to be discussing. And to quote Antonio Guterres, I think we're not going to reach the SDGs without using new technology, digitalization, to get there. And AI is part of that. It's not the only solution. It's one technology that can be helpful if we apply it in the right way to help us achieve the SDGs. But I think we have to remember, though, going into this discussion, that still there's only about half of the world's population that's online. So we need to focus on connectivity and making sure that everybody can participate. I think that's going to be crucial. But if we do that, I think also that focusing on connectivity, but also local content and relevant content will mean that more people who actually have access to the internet will use it as well. We know today that the fact that many language groups don't find relevant content on the internet means that they don't actually use it, and that we can't exploit the internet as sort of the highway to deliver other services in better ways and delivering more for the people of this world. And that is also an important point, I think. This is about people. It is about being able to provide better services for people. It's being able, making governments able to provide what their people need, and also spend our resources in wiser ways and more efficient ways. We know that reaching the SDGs will require that countries provide most of the resources. So national resource mobilization is key. The UN estimates that maybe 95% of the resources that needs to be invested in achieving the SDGs needs to come from the countries themselves. Which means that taxation systems is going to be important. And I think new technology and digitalization can help us, can help countries put in place effective taxation systems, which will make it possible for them to invest in good health and good education and so forth. The Minister of Finance from Ghana, he once told me a story that the ship owners in the harbor were complaining that he raised the harbor tax. And he said, well, I didn't raise the harbor tax. What I did was I started collecting it. And the reason why he could do that and why the harbor tax now suddenly came into the state coffers was because of new technology. And I think it's an illustrative point of what new technology can bring in terms of improvements if we use it in the right way. Now, there are, of course, many different aspects to development and the SDGs. And you have the humanitarian relief efforts, where I do believe that AI is already making its impact. You have, for instance, the famine action mechanism, which I think is a very interesting case in point, because it's a new alliance where you have both the private sector and the usual suspects, so to speak, the World Food Programme, the World Bank, the UN, but also Amazon, Google and Facebook, Google and Microsoft. And what they do is basically their aim is to use big data to predict famine and make sure that we can actually prevent it by spending money beforehand rather than spending a lot more money afterwards, and also saving, of course, most importantly, many, many lives in that process. We have another example of the Norwegian Red Cross, which has cooperated with Microsoft in developing an AI that can detect outbursts of epidemics and thus prevent them from spreading. So there are many good uses of AI in this field, and many more examples that are put into place. We see blockchain technology also being used by many of the relief organizations. So this is going to be much more widespread as we go forward than what it has been so far, I think, with great potential of helping a lot of people and making sure that countries can help themselves to improve their services for their people. One of the things that we worked on in the high-level panel was trying to address the issue that Well, keeping state-of-the-art digital systems is costly and challenging even for those countries who have the most resources. And I come from Norway, and I find it challenging as well. But for some of the poorest countries in the world, it's an almost insurmountable task. So one of the things that we spent a lot of time talking about was how we can make available technology that has already been developed. And that can be reused in a local context other places. So we came up with this concept of digital public goods. And the ambition of creating a platform or a go-to place for countries, stakeholders who wanted to make use of layers of technology or technology that has already been developed by others, and adapting it to their local circumstances. Now, for instance, you have the Aadhaar system in India, the EID system that they have developed there, which is now, the World Bank is helping Morocco to take this system to Morocco, and of course, making a local version of it. It's not going to be exactly the same, but it means that Morocco doesn't need to spend all the money of developing a system of their own. You have X-roads. And we're here in Estonia, and I've just been presented of how X-road in various variants is spreading around the world to countries like Kyrgyzstan and Namibia and many other places, and helping them to make that leap. But what was, I think, an important point, though, that was somebody said today, was that technology is really not, the technology is not the problem. You need the capacity to be able to implement it. You need a methodology, and that's transferable, to be able to make use of it. And you need capacity at all levels. And the government that wants to make use of it needs to own it, in the sense that they need to feel ownership to the product that is theirs in the end. And of course, but I think we have already developed a prototype of such a platform together with UNICEF Venture, and the aim is to make sort of a global alliance so that we can, around this platform, and get companies and countries and other stakeholders to volunteer open source technologies and other kinds of technologies to this platform.
When you say we, it's Norway?
Well, the panel has recommended this, and Norway has co-funded the development of a prototype for a platform. But taking it from a prototype to a full-scale platform, we're going to need more allies, put it that way. And it needs to be an effort that is owned by more stakeholders, both north and south, and the whole community. Multi-stakeholder approach, and I think that's this could really be helpful for a lot of in achieving the SDGs if we do it in the right way. But we still need to address the connectivity issue, which is huge, before we can really talk about making use of all the great potential that new technology holds. And of course, it's important to also add that in this process, all technology can be used for good, but it can also be used for bad. So respecting human rights is crucial. Accountability and transparency is going to be key, and we need to make sure that we don't that we hold all the stakeholders to the same standard, and that we have a global joint effort, I think, in having some principles of especially connected to AI, but to all kinds of technology. And I think there's a good discussion going on now about the ethical principles relating to AI, and that is of course a very important foundation. That being said, I think all countries can make use of AI and new digital technologies to help us achieve the SDGs. And of course, the SDGs are not for the developing countries, it's for every country. And every country has something to work on. We're not there yet. And if you look at SDG number 13, for instance, on climate change, this is not something we can leave to other countries to do. It's something we need to do together, and a concerted effort. But there we also see many, many examples of how AI is contributing. For instance, now we're testing out autonomous ships in Norway. We've allocated a fjord for autonomous testing out of autonomous ships, and next year there will be the first autonomous cargo ship operating between 3 Norwegian ports. It will save lots and lots and lots of CO2. It will be electric, of course.
Great.
Run on hydropower. and it will lower CO2 emissions and also make operations a lot more efficient. This kind of technology, I think, will spread, which is good. It needs to, and every country has something to contribute.
That's very exciting. Thank you, Minister. Sofia, I would love to hear from your end, practical applications of AI on the field. What are you talking about? Famine movements, resource allocation. How do you use natural language processing? How do you use computer vision and combine them to get solutions on the field, practical, hands-on solutions on the field?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So this is exactly what we're dealing with. We have many data sources, and I had the honor of working with UNHCR for a couple of years now, and I have seen basically our biggest data sets are regarding text. And we have translations, and there are also a lot of registration information coming from the field. And it was about 2 years ago when we had from an operation the challenge posed to us, specifically in the region of Somalia, where we had to predict movement. Basically, they are divided in 18 regions, and you have to, we were wanting to explore at the time to see how we can predict and how accurate we can predict arrivals in the camps. Yes, so there we worked together with the information managers from the field. They are the data owners at that point, and the idea is to, on the ownership, to also have them participating in the project, not just the receivers of our final research. So in the end, we did time series forecasting, multivariate time series forecasting for analyzing even market prices. We incorporated a lot of data that regarding climate, and we did some social media monitoring, basically on the on conflict events and the text that is related to those. And then you can extract from that, you can extract like severity and such cases. But it was until recently that we saw that a lot of the international organizations are putting effort in the Horn of Africa, either measuring NDVI from satellite imagery, or in other cases, they are doing with the World Bank like resource allocation and examining where the livelihoods in regions, etc. So another thing that I wanted to mention on the data is that we were trying to collect 10 years of data, and that was very, very difficult because there is no consistency, and yes, it's not the ideal situation to collect, right? So we don't have boots in the field in these cases, and I think that's why that project has been challenging. And not just that, also the results and how you communicate those results, and like what are the repercussions that you should take as a team and in the field by having those numbers, and how you basically use your resources in the most optimal way to avoid risk in the operation. So that's one of the projects.
Okay,
and
great.
Yes.
So that's very interesting, because that's very very hands-on, in the Hodes of Africa, how it can be implemented. But briefly, since we have a short amount of time, could you each tell me what you consider would be the largest challenge for AI to be rolled out at scale to get solutions to get to the SDGs, from a macro and on the field level?
Well, I think, as with all technology, it has to do with people. So we need the culture to innovate, we need the leadership to dare to make use of new technology, we need the competence to actually put it into practice and use it. And this is going to require resources, which is why it's so important that we share best practices and share technology that's already been developed, and make it possible for others to innovate on top of what has already been developed. I think that's going to be crucial for us to be able to leapfrog maybe some of the development stages that usually is associated with making use of this kind of technology. But I think lastly, I think it's crucial that we don't only focus on AI. AI is one technology. And I think digitalization at large, new technology at large, is really where we need to put in our efforts, and then AI is a part of that picture, but not the whole picture.
good point.
Yes. I think I should also focus on people, because, okay, we are talking about having the refugees in the center of all our efforts, and in the end, we don't include them enough, and they are the receivers of this final product, and we are taking the risk, but in the end, the risk is there. On those people. And in other cases where we can directly involve the users, it has been easier because you're co-designing, and I don't think enough emphasis was put on the design processes that we follow when we develop solutions. But on the refugees setting, you're trying to achieve allowing to have integrity and allowing them to have their own voice inside the project, inside any kind of development that is happening for them, right? So
there are challenges, but you give us hope that they can indeed be implemented on the field and at scale also from a global perspective. So I think our time is running out. Thank you very much, both of you. Very interesting discussion. Appreciate it. Yolanda, if you can come back on stage.